Okay. So thank you guys for watching the video before class about the 8 steps to submit an NIH grant. I hope that gave you a good overview of the process and the necessary steps from start to finish for an NIH grant. And they have a lot more videos like that. So if you found that helpful, let me know, and I've got a lot more videos I could share. Okay, so as we kick off the second half of class, I want to ask a question. How have you or your organization submitted grants directly to funders, not just as a subcontract? And you can say yes, many, yes, a few, no, or I don't know. I recognize that maybe not all of you work in this field. So let's see. Yep. Okay, my polls are back. Okay, great. Most of you have said, the majority, here I'm going to end and share the results with you. Most of you said yes, many, which is great. That's awesome. And then some of you have submitted a few, and then some of you don't know, which is fine. You may not even work in grants submissions, grant submissions. All right, great. So for those of you who said yes, who have you submitted grants to? Follow-up question. Let's launch it here. Okay, the options are NIH, CDC, USAID, foundations, nonprofits, corporations, or other. And you can select as many as you know. Awesome. I'm going to share this with you guys. This is great. So most of you said NIH, so that's awesome. And I hope that this session is helpful in terms of familiarizing yourself more with NIH. CDC, yep, great. And a lot of the requirements for CDC can be similar to NIH depending on the grant. USAID, basically everyone has submitted a little bit of everything. That's great. Okay. So we're kind of moving along in the grant life cycle. We covered how to find funding, and now we're going to be talking about how to prepare your proposal. Our first section is talking about grant components, or all the different pieces that you need for a grant submission. I like to think about grant components in 2 categories, the business part and the scientific part. The scientific part is what your investigators are responsible for writing. These are the technical details about the proposal and how it's going to get accomplished. The business proposal includes more administrative and definitely budgetary items. And this is the part that you as an administrator will likely help with or maybe even lead. The business proposal almost always includes a budget and a justification. The budget is the detailed plan for the funds that you're requesting, and the budget justification is justifying how you're going to use these funds and why you are requesting them. Drafting budgets can be challenging, but I recommend working closely with your PI to understand the project, and that will help you to create a budget. And Donna will be covering budget basics and allowable costs next week in her class. Bio sketches describe qualifications of the research team being proposed. And although the investigator will need to draft and write their biosketch, something that administrators can help with is making sure that they're formatted both correctly and consistently. You want to make sure that when a reviewer is reading an application, that all the biosketches are in the same format. Most investigators also include letters of support in their applications. And this is another item that you could assist with. Your PI may draft the content of the letter itself, but you may assist with compiling them, making sure that you're getting them by the deadline, making sure that they are all signed, that sort of thing. And then lastly, most grants have so much data entry to do. There are a lot of forms. They're asking you to fill out information about your organization, about the investigators, about the project itself. So that's why I say it's helpful to have an understanding of exactly, just a basic understanding of what the project is, and that'll help you fill out the form. Is it a clinical trial? Are there human subjects research being conducted? That sort of thing. This is not a comprehensive list of documents, but this is more of an example of kind of business components of a grant. So moving on to science components, you will likely not be required or asked to write these files, but you could help edit them if you feel comfortable. And then more importantly, you can make sure that they meet the required formatting. So I just want you to be aware of what these documents are. So I'm just going to run through them briefly. Specific aims describes the overall aims for your project. For NIH, this document is just 1 page long. The research strategy describes how you're going to accomplish those aims. So this is the who, what, where, when, why of the application. For NIH, this document is 12 pages. The facilities and resources and equipment files describe the institutional and infrastructure support for your project. For example, if you're proposing to do lab science, you're going to want to tell them exactly about your lab and the capabilities that you have so that they know that you'll be able to get this project done. I do help my PI draft these files, but it's something that you could work on if you were interested in. And more importantly, I create and keep templates for all these files. You can reuse this language in a lot of different grant applications. So if you develop this once, then you can use it over and over again. Next, NIH has quite extensive human subjects forms if your research is categorized as such. As an admin, you may need to help your investigators fill out these forms by providing them a template and then entering it into the system. So it's helpful just to know what's required. And then there are all kinds of files that may or may not be required depending on your project. So that's these bottom 3 I've provided as examples. Some projects require a resource sharing plan. This describes like how you're going to share results and how you're going to manage the resources that you develop in the project. It'll say in the RFA if it's required or not. A foreign justification from the NIH's perspective is required anytime that there's going to be research conducted in an international setting. So probably most of the time you're going to need this file. And then a multi-PI plan. You'll only need that file if you propose a multi-PI project, but that's just something to be aware of. And again, this is not a comprehensive list, but this is just examples of the kind of scientific parts of the proposal. So unfortunately for NIH, there's not a universal set of application forms. It's important to use the application package that's provided with your FOA. Each package of forms is customized based on the FOA that you are applying for. And you can access application forms through the method that you choose to submit your grant, and we'll talk about that in a bit. However, you can access example forms just to get an idea of what is in the forms itself. and I've provided a link for you there. All right, thinking about submitting an NIH grant, if you've never done it before, can be really overwhelming. There are so many documents and so many forms. What am I responsible for as an administrator? So make a plan with your PI as to exactly what your responsibilities are, but some examples are keeping a checklist of what files are needed for the application, making sure that formatting and page limits are followed. You could also potentially lead some of the business components of the proposal, such as the budget or the justification. You could coordinate documents from a subcontract site. Definitely could help with data entry. And then making sure that the grant is submitted with no errors. That's so important. It's your PI's job to propose the science for the grant, but it's your job to make sure that it gets submitted on time and correctly. So grants are really all about following directions. And this is something that investigators really lean and rely on administrators for. They don't have time to check every little detail of formatting. And so this is something that we should really be aware of and help with when we're submitting grants. So this includes eligibility, we talked about earlier. Make sure that you're eligible before you apply for a grant. Making sure that the FOA supports human subjects work, if that's what you're proposing. When is the grant due? If it's a resubmission or a revision, making sure that you have enough time to submit it and that you picked the right deadline. You can also look at what type of grant is this and what are the requirements with that specific type of grant. Are there going to be subcontracts? If there are, you may need some extra time to kind of get all the pieces in place. There are so many different formatting requirements with margins, the type of font, page limits, spacing, numbering. So that's something that we should really be paying attention to. And lastly, things like letters of support I mentioned earlier. Are all of the letters signed? Is it legible after you scanned a letter? So maybe somebody gave you a hard copy and you scanned it. Can you even read it after you scanned it? Here's a brief checklist to cover your bases with NIH formatting. Most government agencies in the US will have similar requirements, but this is to cover NIH right now. So make sure that everything that you attach in your application is a PDF. NIH does not allow Word documents or Excel files, basically any other type of file. You can only submit PDFs. Make sure that you are using 8.5 by 11-inch paper size. We come across this a lot for working with international partners because so many other countries use different sizes of paper. Unfortunately, NIH only will accept 8.5 by 11. And this is something you can double check for your letters of support. You want to make sure that they're all the same size. You may need to resize it if somebody sent you a different paper size. Margins should be 1/2 inch or larger. File names should be 50 characters or less. I had to completely resubmit an entire grant one time because of the file name issue. So it's a real problem. And it's something that if you see something that looks pretty long, count it. You want to watch out for special characters, accent marks, like greater than or equal than signs can sometimes trigger issues when they're in some of those like NIH fillable forms. It's not really a problem if it's just in a document, but in a fillable form, it'll sometimes give you an error if there happens to be a special character listed. I've experienced this a lot in human subjects forms. A lot of my investigators will put like a greater than or equal sign for human subjects eligibility, and it'll give you an error if that comes up. You'll want to use 11-point font or larger. NIH has a few styles that they recommend. And lastly, page limits, double checking that everything fits. This is a summary from this website. This website has all of the formatting requirements for NIH, and I've just provided a few highlights and things that I always double check. Page limits for NIH, they can vary depending on the grant. So again, I provided the link for NIH page limits. This is an example of an RA1, and it'll be pretty specific about which things need to have certain page limits. If an RFA says something has a specific page limit, that is always going to override the standard. So really check the FOA and make sure that if there's any page limits written in there, that's what you're following. And when in doubt, just double check the application guide. NIH provides instructions for like general applications. You'll see that here, the first line. And then there are even more instructions based on the type of grant that you're applying to. So using both in combination is going to give you a winning strategy. And the HTML version of the general instructions is honestly one of my most frequented websites. I don't know if that's embarrassing or says I'm really good at my job, but this is a really, really great website. The HTML version is searchable. It just appears like a regular website, and that is so helpful. So I'm showing you here what it looks like when you open it up. And let's say I'm trying to figure out, my PI says, hey, I need to do this human subjects document, but I don't even know what is supposed to be included in the document. And I say, okay, I'm gonna go to the application guide. I'm gonna search human subjects. That's what he asked me. And this is so hard to see, sorry, but this is the human subjects form for NIH. So I'm gonna click that and I'm gonna scroll down. And oh, he asked me, what is in the recruitment and retention plan? I'm going to click on that. And there it is. It'll tell you exactly how it's formatted and then the content. And normally I'll just copy and paste this into an email and say, this is what's included in this document. And then he'll draft it. Okay, so we are wrapping up this session about grant components. Writing and submitting NIH grants may seem daunting, but it just takes practice. Practice really does make perfect for grants, and even still, we come across weird things all the time. You learn so much from one submission to the next. This is a really learnable skill. I had very minimal grant experience before I started this job. You really learn it on the job as you go. And it's okay to get errors because it'll teach you a lesson about what not to do the next time that you submit a grant. And lastly, rely on your mentors and your colleagues. We have so many sample applications, sample files, draft files to share with you. And NIH also posts sample files, which I've linked there. Okay, so our next topic is proposal development, submission, and timelines. This section shouldn't take too long, so we'll take any questions at the end of this session. Grants can take a long time to come to fruition between I have an idea to clicking the submit button. But most of the parts of this sample timeline is these are things your investigator is doing. They're brainstorming, they're talking to leaders in their field of study, they're drafting and thinking about the proposal. Likely you will not get involved until hopefully 2 months, maybe 1 month before the submission even happens. So I know it's important for you to plan just as much as it is for your investigator. So really encourage them to let you know as soon as they think that they want to submit a grant, and that'll help you plan a little bit better. So the first thing that I do when my investigator says he wants to submit a grant is create a timeline for the submission. And here are some things to consider when you're creating a timeline. First, pay really close attention to time zones and when the grant is due. An agency is not going to give you an extension if you accidentally mess up the time zones, thinking that it was due 5 p.m. your time and actually it was 5 p.m. their time. So definitely take that into consideration. You may need to have multiple deadlines for different files if your organization requires some sort of review period. So for example, Vanderbilt wants to review the business part of our proposals 10 days before the grant is due. So we have to make sure to get everything done 10 days before. Think about who is going to submit your grant and when are they available. It might be you, it might be your PI, it might be like your central research office or something like that. If your PI is not submitting the grant, make sure that they know when the final documents need to be ready by. In my experience, investigators want to work until like the very, very last second. And then finally, right when you need it, they'll send you the file. Once you decide on your deadlines, make sure that everyone is aware of the deadlines and that they stick to the plan. And it's smart to give yourself some extra time, especially if you are the one submitting the grant. You want to make sure that you have enough time to enter everything, check for errors, and that you're not rushing before the deadline. I think when people rush, errors can be more likely. So I've got a screenshot here on the right. This is just an example of a timeline that we use for our global health grants. And I'll share this template with you guys as well. If you have any templates that you guys really like to use at your institutions, please share them and we can share them with the group too. So after you create a timeline, it's a good idea to make a checklist for the grant. Here are some things to consider when you make a checklist. The required files will depend on your FOA. So make sure you read your FOA very closely and then adjust your checklist accordingly. Keep track of who is responsible for each file so that you know who to check with, if they missed a deadline, or if you just want a status update on a certain file. It's important to think about who needs to review files before they are finalized. Does your central grants office want to review? Are there collaborators who need to review the files? A mentor that needs to review the files? This can dictate when you need them done by. And then lastly, information about the project can trigger additional pieces that are needed. So that's why it's important to try and get a basic understanding of your project when you start out. For example, if you have an international component for NIH, you'll need a foreign justification. If your PI wants to do a multiple PI situation, you'll need a multiple PI plan document. If you use genomic data in your application, you'll need a genomic data sharing plan. So those are just some examples. So you'll see again our VAGH sample checklist on the right. It is simple, but it's effective. We just state what the file is, when it's due, who's responsible, and then what is the current status of that file. And again, I'll share this sample with you. And if you have other versions that you really like to use and have found are effective, please send them and we can share them with the group. All right, so that is finishing talking about grant components and developing proposal timelines and checklists. Does anyone have any questions?
Hillary, there aren't any in the chat.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'm gonna move on in the essence of time. Oh, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, guys, this is our last topic, submission portals. We are only talking about NIH submission portals right now, just so that you're aware. But grants.gov kind of interacts with a lot of US agencies, but that's the experience that we're taking today. So I've already talked extensively about the NIH website, but on the grants and funding website, you'll find the how to apply guide. It contains a lot of information, and here are some of the different sections. The top section has general application process information. So this is information on how to prepare to apply, like registrations. What do you need to set up with your organization before you submit an application? How to write the application itself, formatting attachments and budgets, that sort of thing. And then actually submitting it and the submission policies associated. There's a resources section down here with annotated form sets, sample applications, links to the different systems, and then the application instructions itself, which we looked at earlier. So there are two main systems involved in the NIH grant application process. There's grants.gov and ERA Commons. Each system has its own registration and terminologies. Grants.gov is the online portal used by all federal agencies that's how all grant applications to the US government go through grants.gov. And then ERA Commons is a system managed by NIH specifically, and this allows applicants, grantees, and NIH staff to securely share and manage application files and process grant-related information. Both of them have kind of different terminology as it comes to key points of contact. So you'll see some examples here of different sorts of naming for people that you'll need to have for a grant submission. I'm not going to go too into detail about that, but there's a link down here about key systems and roles for each of those if you need it. And then there are a lot of different registrations that you'll need in order to apply for an NIH grant. If your organization doesn't have these already, you'll need to start early. I think most of you probably do since you work with us in grants. So you probably have these already, but just as a refresher, the first is the System for Award Management, or SAM, and this is needed to do business with the government. You have to renew this annually. You may have had someone in our Vanderbilt, if you have a contract with us, you'll probably have had someone in contracts ask you for a copy of your SAM registration. That's what that is. If you're registered in SAM, you will also get a DUNS number. This is like a unique identifier for your organization. But starting January 25th, it is switching to Unique Entity Identifier, UEI. If you have a SAM registration already, you already have a UEI for your organization. So this isn't something you need to create new or re-register for. It is in SAM. So that's how you'll find that. I'm sure if you're submitting a grant with Vanderbilt or with anyone else in the next month or so, we'll start asking for what is your UEI number. Then there's grants.gov. You have to register for that in order to submit grants. And then ERA Commons, you need to register for that in order to work with NIH. And then I don't think most of you guys apply for this, but SBA is the Small Business Administration. NIH also does a lot of small business grants, but I don't think that applies to anyone in our group. So ERA Commons registrations are going to be required for all key personnel starting January 25th as well. So that's something that we'll all need to work on in the next month or so. And lastly, how do you actually submit a grant to NIH? There are 3 electronic system options. They are electronic systems, so you do need working internet in order to submit these. So that's something to keep in mind when you're making your timelines of, oh, do I need to give myself some leeway in case the internet goes down? So those 3 options are Assist, system-to-system solutions, and Workspace. I would say the majority of grants are submitted through Assist and a system-to-system solution. Assist is very user-friendly. I love that as a platform, and I would highly recommend working with Assist. We at Vanderbilt use a system-to-system solution. It's a software that's developed by Vanderbilt, but you don't need to know too much about that if that's not an option for your organization. So all of these options, it doesn't matter how you submit it, it all then goes to grants.gov, and then it gets submitted to NIH. And I'm not going to read these out loud in the essence of time, but there's just a little bit more information about those options. And if you submit a lot of NIH grants or you want to submit more, I would highly recommend watching this video from NIH called Ready, Set, Submit. It was from their regional seminar, I think last year, and I find it really helpful. All right, I think this is our last poll question. Asking, have you used any of the following systems? Select all that apply. I'm gonna launch it. Awesome. Looks like a lot of you have used grants.gov and ERA Commons. That's awesome. Some people have used Assist, Workspace, a system-to-system software. Cool. And then SAM.gov. That's great. I'm glad that you guys have experience working with these platforms. Okay. Any questions about submission methods? Okay, I'm going to move on. This is our very last section, and then we're going to go into a brief discussion before we end. Looking at the time here. Just a few words of wisdom. You can't write a grant, or you can't get a grant unless you write one. So I know it's a lengthy process, but it's worth your time to go through it. You'll learn so much even after just one submission. And then aimed with some reviewer comments, you can make grants even better if it doesn't get funded the first time. Seek experienced mentors. That is exactly what this network is about, is being able to lean on each other when we have questions and issues about grants. And our group has so much collective knowledge. And lastly, you have to play by the rules. So really make sure that you're reading the guidelines, that you're following the guidelines. If you don't follow the instructions, your proposal may not even be eligible for review. An idea is something that only exists in your mind, and your job is to present the idea in a fundable proposal. So how do you know what makes a grant fundable? These are some questions that you can ask yourself. You can also share this list with your investigators and have them ask themselves the questions to make sure that you're submitting to the right grant, to the right funding agency, and is this even the right research to propose? Lastly, this is a process. There has to be so many pieces in place in order to get a grant funded. It has to be a good idea with a good institutional fit. You have to make sure that you're reading the guidelines. Is the sponsor interested in this? You want to make a detailed plan, develop a budget based on your plan, and be persistent. Revise and resubmit your grant if it doesn't get funded the first time. So you've gone through all of these hoops and you've submitted a grant. Now what? You hurry up and you wait. The review processes for grant reviews can be very long. If you're interested in learning more about NIH's peer review process, I've put a link for you there. But as you can see from the graphic, it goes through very many levels of review by different groups. This is at NIH. All right, guys, we'll have about 10 minutes now. And I just wanted to, I know that I've been talking so much. I want to hear from you guys about successful strategies for grant submissions. A few of you I know are so experienced in this, and we would love to hear from you about, consider an easy submission versus a stressful submission. What made the difference? What types of issues have you encountered in grant submissions and how did you solve them? You could also talk about roles people play in a grant submission and how that can contribute to success. So the floor is open and I would love to hear from you guys. And if any Vanderbilt team members have contributions, please share as well.
I may call on some people. Bilia. Bilia, do you have words of wisdom? Daphne or Renee?
Hi, Holly. Hi, Vanderbilt. Thank you so much, Hillary. I know you've been talking a lot and may have seen like you've been talking to I don't know. We were all there listening, really.
No, it's good. It's okay. I know it's a lot of information. Daphne, you've submitted a lot of grants. What experiences do you have to share?
Well, just reflecting on stressful versus non-stressful, I think most of them are stressful. They always become stressful towards the end. But there's definitely, I think it helps a lot when your science person or your PI or your technical person, however you want to call it, actually plans with you, right? So they stick to your timelines. They are aware of how long certain things take, that it actually takes long to capture all the data in, let's say, Assist or in Workspace or whatever, and that they are respectful of those timelines. And that makes it a lot less stressful, I think. Yeah. So
yeah, I agree.
I guess teamwork is is what's needed, real teamwork. Not like you do your bit and I do my bit. No, you really got to do it together.
Yeah, there can be a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
So just from our side, when we initially started at Aurum, we were very, very limited, and I think I was the only person. And definitely having a checklist and a timeline document and discussing that with your PI really helps, because people then tend to comply and everybody's agreed to it. And then regular check-in meetings or calls just to as where everybody is on the status of their documents or progress that's been made, that I also find helps quite a bit when you're doing an application.
Yeah, I
love that.
Yeah, so, okay.
Go ahead, Awal.
Yeah, especially if it's on RO1, where the study design requires a lot of data that will have to support the application. And that is really very, very tedious, because you have to rely on others to submit that information. It's not forthcoming. and you will be working on the deadline with the PI as well. So that is really one of the areas that is, I think, difficult to get about, where you will have to rely on others in other facilities, especially the facilities that you are expected to conduct the study. And if the information required is not forthcoming, it's going to be very difficult for both you and the PI at that particular time. That's one of the most challenging aspects.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to plan for a submission if you don't have all the information. Yeah, so it's great you'll have to rely on your team, but also work together to support each other. Thank you.
I think tying together last week's lecture where we talked about how administrators support investigators, especially new investigators, it's really important that you may do some training with them and describe and say, you know, it's one thing to have a really good idea, but you have to have a certain format. You have to, you have to consider all of these things. So you have to be prepared to kind of orient them and be patient and remind them. And at least in my experience, nothing speaks stronger than a horror story of we pulled together grants and it wasn't in the right format and it got rejected. Or we rushed a submission and forgot, a section and it was rejected. Funding agencies get so many applications that they're just almost finding ways to reject it. And so for those of us that have submitted for a long time, we have had those instances and it is heartbreaking. It is, months of work and just a really tedious, checkbox you didn't check or a component that you forgot. So I think sharing those kind of experiences really helps, hopefully, your investigator really heed your warning and to see you as a trusted advisor. We are a network. We will hopefully forever be a network. So if you need any horror stories, we could share them. If you need any help along the way, we're here for you.
Kind of building on that, I'm wondering in terms of issues encountered, if anyone here has had the experience where you had to tell an investigator no to a grant application because there just wasn't sufficient time or you missed deadlines. Because I know that can be tough. We've certainly had to do it on our end and it can be difficult to navigate. So I'd love to just hear from some of you in terms of your experiences with managing those kind of deadlines.
Yeah, hello, Anne. I think I presently some 3 weeks back, I have that experience. Yeah, the investigator is in US and he wanted me to submit his application, K43 grant. He has completed everything and we had, I think it was less than 12 hours, not even, I think less than 6 hours to the deadline.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
It was, I think, and he has not done the budget and some other integral part, even the assembly application is not done. I said, actually, I don't think this is possible. There is no way we can do this. Because even the assembling the application to required format and specification, it will take time. And we have to do it, and the budget have to comply with the objectives and some other integral part of the study. So I said, probably we have to wait until the next opportunity announcement. So he understood and we just have to leave the submission.
Yeah, I applaud you for doing that because that can be difficult.
Yeah, actually, I told you it's a near impossible.
Mm.
Yeah. We've definitely had that experience.
Hello.
Hi, Betty.
Hey, hi. I'm quiet today, sorry. Okay. So I'm sorry, Billy, hearing that it's so sad. If I was in your shoes, I said I would just relocate to my village immediately. I would just go somewhere where there's because you can't do that in 6 hours. You can't. It's really unfortunate. One way I think you can support as a team for me, we've learned the research coordinator has taught us one system. He mostly wants, whenever we have something to put together, we put all the necessary documents together, and he will always advise to project those documents for clear view so everyone can contribute together. Even before putting all, while projecting, you put all your final based on the question format. Everyone is there sitting together and you all contribute and do the work together. So that goes also mostly for our due diligence. When we are completing them, except for some that are quite really difficult, but when we're completing them, we request, once you've had all the documents put together, you project them so you can do them with not just one decision, but a decision of many. So then it's, but in cases like with grant submission, I think you always have to make sure the first thing is like Hilary said, is to make sure you read every requirement. And then you always have in mind the timeline. That for sure is the key. You can put up all the struggles, you can put up all the stress and every other thing, but once you wait for the deadline to complete work, even when the work has been done, most times you might miss out or leave out something that you've actually done, but because you are in a rush, you don't have ample time to put them together. So that's really bad. And that's more painful when you're done and you've submitted, then you realize you forgot something that you actually had, or you uploaded something that is not supposed to be uploaded in that. It's quite difficult. So with an ample time and space, I think that should always be in mind for me.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Betty. I totally agree. It's great to have a plan and try to stick to it as best as you can. All right, guys, we are at the end of our 2 hours. Thank you so much for all of your participation today. Donna will be teaching next week's class. Donna, did you want to give just a brief overview of what next week looks like?
Sure. So the excitement you all have to look forward to, we are going to be talking about biosketches and developing other support, especially under the new guidelines that NIH has recently released. And we'll be talking about budgets and allowable costs, things like that. So I promise it will be as exciting as humanly possible. And I look forward to talking with all of you next week.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week. I'll send a reminder email about the pre-class assignments for you.
Thanks, everyone.
Very exciting class. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you.